Pittsburgh Steelers fans, it is time once again for another edition of Know Your Enemy. My name is Michael Beck, deputy editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, and joined, as always, by one Mr. Jeffrey Benedict. Jeffrey, how are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm a little riled up tonight, Michael.
Oh, I can believe it. I can definitely believe it. Before we get started, we will have a guest. They will be coming on in a couple minutes' time, but we wanted to chat about the game a little bit. But before we even get to that, I want to wish one Mr. Brian Anthony Davis, our podcast producer, a very happy birthday. I believe it's his 39th birthday once again. So happy birthday to Brian. Hope you're out there watching, Brian. Happy birthday. But Jeffrey, I know there's a whole lot you want to get off your chest when it comes to that game. So I will turn the floor to you, and you can take it away, sir.
All right. I've had it with all the talk about the Steelers being, are they overrated at 11-0? First off, 11-0 isn't a rating. It's a record. Like, they won those games. You're 11-0 because you won them. Like, you can be overrated in the power rankings. You can be overrated when someone makes a list of the top 10 teams. You can't be overrated in the standings. That's what you actually did. I want to say that first, but also people were like, are the Steelers the worst 11-0 team? Or they act like 11-0 is some like sacred thing that do the Steelers really deserve to be in this category of 11-0 teams when 9 teams have been 11-0 since in the last 30 years. 9. That's almost one every 3 seasons. Like someone makes it to 11-0. It's not like a huge rare occasion, right? You just have to win your games. And all of them, every single one of them has an easy schedule, and every single one of them has close games against a weak opponent. I want to actually go through a few of them. I'm going to start with the 2007 Patriots, who actually went 16-0, and I'm not even going to talk about what they did in the playoffs. But they were blowing out everyone, and they're like the standard of like a 16-0 team should be dominating people and putting up records and setting records for scores and point differential. That team beat the 5-5 Eagles at the time that would finish the season 8-8 by 3 points. John Harbaugh's worst year as a head coach, 2007 Ravens, they finished the season 5-11. They lost to the Patriots by 3 that season. Patriots had to score a touchdown in the last minute. Baltimore was going to beat them, right? That's the 2007 Patriots. Everyone looks at them. They had 2 losses to 500 or worse, or 2 wins by over 500 or worse teams by 3 or 4 points, right? Close games. They did that. You can go to like the 2005 Indianapolis Colts. They start off 11-0. They end up, I think, 14-2. They get to 13-0, lose to the Chargers. The Chargers were a playoff seed, but that team was 11-0. They were a great team, and if you look back at history, that is the best Peyton Manning team. That is the best team Peyton Manning had. Offense, defense, they were stacked. They went through it in the regular season, looked great, 14-2. They make it to the playoffs. Their first game in the playoffs is against the Steelers, 2005 Steelers team that was miserable all season. Until the end of the season, didn't even look like they were going to make the playoffs. Won a bunch of games to make the playoffs, and they go in there and beat the Colts. Like, 11-0 didn't matter. 11-0 didn't matter for the Colts. It didn't mean a thing. And then you have other teams that actually took 11-0 and they go to the Super Bowl, like 1991. Washington Redskins did it. They made it to 11-0. Game 12 is against the 6-5 Dallas Cowboys. Washington's great. Cowboys are awful. And they lose to the Cowboys. Like, they lose to a division rival who's bad to break their streak. Still won the Super Bowl. Still did it. 1998, Denver Broncos gets to 13-0. This is John Elway's like second run for a championship. They get to 13-0. They go and they face the 5-8 New York Giants and lose to Kent Graham. Like this is what nobody goes undefeated. Nobody does this. Like, if you're not going to go through a 16-game season and every game is brilliant or great. It just doesn't happen. You can go back to 1995, right? The Dallas Cowboys that beat the Steelers in the Super Bowl, they lost twice to the Washington Redskins that year. Redskins were 6-10 that season, 4-10 against the rest of the league, 2-0 against the Super Bowl champion Dallas Cowboys. Like, there's nothing they do. There's no formula in the regular season that gets you success for like the postseason. And that's my main point I want to say with all of this rant. Okay, is that there are exactly 2 things that the regular season record determines. Your regular season determines exactly 2 things and nothing more. One is who makes the playoffs. That's the important thing. Make the playoffs. And the second thing is draft order. We don't care about draft order. We're trying to win a Super Bowl. 11-0 means we are 1 win away from clinching the playoffs. We could go 1-4 the rest of the season and make the playoffs. And people would be like, oh, if we do that, we're definitely not winning the Super Bowl. Well, there was a Super Bowl team not that long ago who went 1-4 at the end of their season and then won the Super Bowl. It was the Baltimore Ravens in 2012. They ended their season going 1-4 and then won the Super Bowl. Like there's no formula here. There's nothing you do in the regular season. Nothing you do in the regular season can determine the result of a playoff game. Nothing. So the goal of the Steelers is to win a Super Bowl. All 11-0 really means, all it means is we are 1 game away from clinching the playoffs. We're going to make it to the playoffs. That's it. That's all that matters. None of the other stuff really matters. And when you get to the playoffs, you find a way to win. I mean, you'd love to say, yeah, we want to be healthy. We want to be playing our best. That doesn't always work either. You know, you get to the playoffs, then just win the game. Then just win each game and that you face. That's all that matters. So people sweating, are we going to lose to somebody? Don't worry. It doesn't matter. We could lose to Washington. We could lose to Cincinnati. We could go 1-4 and win, like, I don't know.
Win the AFC North.
Yeah, win the AFC North. Yeah, like it doesn't. None of that really matters. So take a chill pill for a second. Everyone just relax a bit for the rest of this season. We're going to make the playoffs. And we're going to see what happens after that. Teams have won the Super Bowl losing key players on the way. Teams have gone to the Super Bowl incredibly healthy and lost. There's no formula here. There's none. When the Steelers went to the playoffs, they had Antonio Brown, they had other people healthy, and then they made it to the Cincinnati game, lost everybody. Lost Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown in that game. Still almost beat the Denver Broncos. You can't control these things. Just we got to ride out this season, get to the playoffs, win games in the playoffs. You cannot win a playoff game in the regular season. You can't do it.
And on top of that, with this weird COVID season, if we hit playoff time, and who even knows, some team could just be hammered, and it's not like the NFL could really push games very far in the playoffs. If it's one team, sorry, might mean your season's done.
Yeah.
It really, legitimately.
Yeah. We talked about that at the beginning of the season. A lot of people were saying it. Whoever handles this weird season the best is going to be the one that wins. They're going to be the team that does it. And the Steelers, look, we're not the best team, but we're handling the situation really well, and we're 11-0. You know, we're not playing our best football right now. That seems to change by the quarter. You could be like, you know what, this quarter we're a terrible football team. The next quarter we're amazing. We're the best team in the league. The next quarter, I don't know what we are. You know, you don't even know who this team is until they're actually playing.
Exactly. Now, before I send this invite out to our special guest for the evening, I do have a question on top of that. All that said, should the Steelers be embarrassed from that win? They still won the game, but should they feel any sort of embarrassment or something along those lines because of how it ended up against a team that they really shouldn't have been close with?
I think they should feel kind of like Mike Tomlin was saying, it's unacceptable. That is unacceptable. But to me, I don't actually feel that bad about the game. I expected really awful football. Anytime you get a weird day of the week game, Thursday football is usually the worst football of the week. Those games where they would go to London and everything was thrown off, all your plans, everything was weird and different. Teams would just go out there and play the worst football you would see all year from that team. Well, Wednesday, when the team got, the game gets moved a bunch of times, and they're playing, 3:40, the after school special time slot. I expected bad football. I didn't know if it would be the Ravens are just terrible, and so it doesn't matter that the Steelers aren't playing well, or, one player just has a great game and that swings the game. I didn't know what was going to happen. I just expected bad football, and what we saw was bad football.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what we got there. Now, before our guest comes on here, I think it's starting to get to the point of the year where, regardless or not if it matters, almost start talking about that 16-0 number. When you look at it right now, is that still possible? Is that something that could happen? And is that something that has to happen if they want to get that first overall landing spot in the AFC, and if they want that bye week?
I don't even care about the bye week. Like, at this point, I'm like, I don't care. Bring the playoffs. We're ready for the playoffs. We just got to survive the rest of this season, make it through. 16-0 is possible. I really don't care if they make it to 16-0, because if they, if you get 16-0 and you win the Super Bowl, you're the Super Bowl champs, and all it's going to do is people are going to be like, is this the best team ever? Is the Steelers? You're going to get is the Steelers are the most overrated 19-0 team in history. That's what you're going to get. If the Steelers go 19-0 and win the Super Bowl, you're going to get they're the worst team to ever go 19-0.
They'd also be the best team.
Yeah, and you're also going to spend your entire week before the Super Bowl hearing about the New England Patriots.
Yeah.
If they go 16-0 and make it to the Super Bowl at 18-0, all you will hear about is the New England Patriots. You'll be looking at Tom Brady highlights for a solid week. So, yeah, I don't even care. I don't want that. I don't.
It's interesting. I was diving into the stats of this whole the playoff seeding. It is extremely weird how like that number one seed can be determined in this situation, because the Steelers and Chiefs have barely played any of the same teams. Yeah. I believe it's less than 4 teams, so it throws everything out of whack. The one game the Steelers can lose here on out and still make the champ or that first overall spot in the AFC is against Washington. If they lose one AFC game and they finish 15-1, and so do the Chiefs, they are the number 2 seed. That's what it is. That's what I've seen. If the Steelers have to go to Kansas City, does that change? Does that change anything for you, or is that an issue?
Oh, Kansas City is a nightmare home or away. They are going to be a problem. And really at this point with the players we are down on defense, with Devin Bush missing, with now Bud Dupree out. What it tells me is when we go to face Kansas City, it isn't a story of our defense holds Kansas City in check and our offense scores enough to win. It's our offense is going to have to win a game. They're going to have to score with Kansas City, because this defense is going to do okay, but they're not going to be able to stop Kansas City and shut them down with the players we're missing. They're just not going to be able to do it, probably.
And speaking of players who were missing, actually, we will turn it over. Our special guest has arrived, Mr. Brian Stab. I hope I said that right, from Hogs Haven. Brian, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me. Apologies for, I don't know, what technical difficulties.
No, you are right on time. In fact, a minute or two early from when I said we'd have you on. But Brian, as you come on here, what's the vibe with the Washington football team tied at the top of the conference? What's everyone feeling for this team?
If only there was a consistent feeling to feel. I think it has been very much a roller coaster of a season. I mean, this year has been so long for them, going back to everything from the off season, and then no training camp. That's something that everyone had to deal with, obviously. And then just stumbling straight out of the gate, having Coach Rivera getting his cancer diagnosis and all that sort of at the same time as they're bringing a new coach. It might be a new quarterback. There's a lot of turmoil this year. As of now, coming off a win that I don't think very many people could have anticipated, I think there is a sense of optimism, measured optimism. I mean, no one has disillusions about what this team is, but we've been worse, I suppose.
You know what, Brian? I'm going to turn the same question to you, because I think the vibe in Pittsburgh's a whole lot worse, and the records are very different at this point. Would you say?
Let's swap. Okay? We'll take your guys and your record. You can have our guys, no questions asked. Okay.
Jeffrey, do you think the Steelers can turn it around in this week?
Yeah, I last week to me was an anomaly. It's just Wednesday, weird game. It's got moved all those times. It's just a weird day of the week game that the Steelers came out completely flat. So I don't think it's a trend. I think it's more, the thing that worries me more about this game is that Washington, they've got some young talent. They've got some playmakers, and it looks like a team that kind of was like, oh wait, we can win games, and then came into Dallas and was like, no, we can win games, like we can do this, and that's a lot of momentum, that's a lot of energy. They've had some time off, they've had a little bit extra time to look at the Steelers to really get this together. I would not be surprised to come out and get punched in the mouth by a team that is more talented than their record, that has suddenly figured out, oh wait, we can actually have success in this league.
Right now, Brian, of course, like I said, tied atop that NFC East. Do you feel like this team has a real chance at taking the division?
This is something I've battled with a little bit because every instinct in my body and everything that I know about this team says, no, of course not. But everything else around, I mean, the NFC East, right, this year has been just an abysmal joke. I guess this week they locked it up in aggregate that the division would finish with a sub 500 record. So there's no way that the teams together could be better than 500 as a group. It's pathetic. It's just really a question of like, do I trust Philadelphia and Dallas and New York to be even worse? And I've seen them do some dumb stuff too. I've seen them really struggle. So do I think Washington could back their way into a division championship, presumably with a losing record? Based on what I've seen beyond them, yeah, I think it could happen. It could happen. And we're going to feel pretty weird about it. Like, okay, what are the Kings of S Mountain? What does that get you? But it could happen.
And Jeffrey, going up against a potential division leader as well, as we've seen, the Steelers, of course, like we've already said, they struggled mightily yesterday. What do they got to do to change, or what do they got to do to be successful this week?
I'll go right to Mike Tomlin and say not suck. That's the starting point. Is when the ball hits you in the hands, try to catch it. Don't just bat it back, or like Eric Ebron and Deontay Johnson were both doing. Before the ball even touches your hand, start looking away. Like, oh, where am I going to run? Like, look the catch in. Go back to fundamentals. Get this thing going. On defense, play smart. Like that. Like they played a really, really good game on defense, and then all of a sudden, for one play, they were like, we're just gonna be stupid. We're gonna gamble. Terrell Edmonds is gonna gamble. Minkah Fitzpatrick, he has him. Minkah Fitzpatrick had him, and Hollywood's like gives a little cut like that, and Minkah just spins around on the field. He didn't fall down, but it was pretty bad. Like those are three really good players, and they just looked stupid on that play. It was like, what are you doing? We can't have things like that happen. And we should win this game. I do think that Washington is actually a closer team to us than people realize when you look at the record. I think Dave Schofield had it great on his Stat Geek podcast. He was talking about how close, if you look at team numbers and you look at where they rank, these teams have a lot of areas where they're really close. They're very similar. So it'll be interesting. I think Washington's a tough team, and we're playing them a short week, and they've got some momentum on their side. So I think it's a good challenge.
Now, this Washington football team, they've battled a ton of adversity this year, clearly. Obviously, one of the biggest stories of the year, Alex Smith coming back. So, Brian, can you talk about Alex Smith since he's come back, how he's been as kind of a leader and how he's been on the field?
I think there is no one who thought he was going to do as well as he's done. Not to say he's blown the world apart. I mean, he's frankly at times looked very shockingly nervous, like tenuous, but he has progressed in the same way that the team around him has progressed. There was definitely a game or two where collectively, anytime someone put a hand on him, the pits of our stomach, you got butterflies. It's terrifying. If anyone saw what happened to him when he got hurt, and I had the misfortune of watching that one live and really wishing I hadn't. And then the documentary that they did sort of over this offseason and tracing his trajectory back, it is, I cannot imagine anyone else winning comeback player of the year. I think that there's no way anyone could have won it, even after he took one snap by coming back out there. He was, by all accounts, his life was in danger. And so the fact that he's quarterbacking a professional football team and doing it at the level that he is it's pretty remarkable. Obviously, he has a long way to go, and it's unclear sort of what his ceiling now is. He's in the latter stages of his career. But I think we're all just really grateful that he's able to do what he's doing, and he has shown a lot of heart and a lot of pride, I think, in himself and in the team. And to be able to do that, like, I think the fans are equally as proud of him.
Totally. And as someone obviously a Steeler fans going into this year before we knew Alex Smith was even coming back, I think Steeler fans were kind of expecting that award, kind of in leaning towards Ben Roethlisberger coming back from his elbow, but that's nowhere near to the level of what Alex Smith has gone through. Jeffrey, what do you think Alex Smith means to that team, him coming back, and what do the challenges the Steelers face with him there as that starting quarterback?
Well, he's a steadying presence. He's that kind of guy. He's been multiple places and he's done it. He's been able to win everywhere he's gone. He's been good. He's not a great quarterback, but he's a good quarterback, and he has that stability. He's going to get the ball to people. He's not quite as mobile as he was when he was younger. He's not that guy anymore, but he has that leadership. He has it going. He's one of those situations where you're the Steelers and you're facing a team with a quarterback, and you're like, what we really want to do is get to him and kind of hit him and make him, maybe think about taking hits. And at the same time, I'm like, no, we don't want to do that. Like, it's Alex Smith. Just leave him alone. Just, kind of like let him go. He's a good dude, and try not to kill him. But no, it's going to be, I think he brings that veteran presence. He brings good leadership. But he is not. I don't think it's a good matchup for him in the way that the Steelers can bring a pass rush. I don't think that's good. He's a quarterback you want to just hit.
Brian, speaking of these Washington quarterbacks, Dwayne Haskins. Now, he obviously loses the starting spot earlier in the year. I think even prior to that, the rumors of him possibly being on the trade block is something that's floated around for a while. Mm-hmm. There's obviously the rumors that there's even a small contingency of Steelers fans that were hoping the Steelers could make a move to hopefully make him the successor to Big Ben. Is he still that kind of number 2 guy in Washington? Is his days numbered, or what's going on with Dwayne?
This has been such a weird thing with him. I mean, he's named the starter in camp despite sort of not really having one. Frankly, was put in last season. I thought that was a huge mistake to sort of throw him to the wolves a little bit. He didn't look very good last year, and it sort of, I think, maybe started to rattle his confidence. Is anointed the starter in the preseason, and then by all accounts, and this is nothing that has been said, Ron Rivera hasn't said anything like this, just he kind of stopped. He didn't show the same level of hunger that he didn't. This is the perception that like he didn't seem like he really wanted to keep the job and was making mistakes, but sort of thought that that spot was his and he couldn't lose it. Frankly, the fact that, he is another seemingly hand-picked guy by Dan Snyder. He's seen the guys before him who get sort of that favored treatment, and he knows that there's nothing he can do. He's untouchable. The ownership will always choose their guys over the coaches. And I think this was sort of when Ron Rivera came in and really put his foot down. He said, no, like, this guy isn't doing it for me. Not only is he not my backup, he's my 3rd string quarterback. I mean, he was dropped to 3 when Kyle Allen came in and started a few games before suffering injury. And clearly there is a lot going on there. The relationship didn't go how anybody thought it was going to. But by all accounts now, you see him in these games on the sideline. He's pumping his guys up. There was a play where Alex Smith got tackled out of bounds, and Dwayne Haskins runs over and picks him up by the shoulder pads and pats him on the back. Very, very visible. And everyone's sort of seeing this, and so thinking like, okay, maybe he gets back in good graces. But I mean, it seems like he's got a big hole to dig his way out of, and you hope you don't cut bait on someone with that draft pedigree, but he definitely did not look good when he was starting. And evidently there were more things going on behind the scenes that led to this sort of fall from grace.
Right. Now, Brian, I'm going to come right back at you, this time with the running back, Antonio Gibson. He's exploded on the scene. I'm sure there's a ton of Steeler fans that don't know who this guy is. So what can we kind of expect out of this guy in this matchup? And how has he been able to be so successful as a rookie?
It's funny because he did not start hot, and they started the season with J.D. McKissick and Peyton Barber basically as the 1-2. And the word was, this guy's really good. We have to give him some opportunities to learn the system. We promise, just be patient. And a lot of people, myself included, were saying, well, how can I trust you to tell me to be patient with a guy? Like, I've heard this before, and these guys don't pan out. And early on, they started working him in. He was a wide receiver in college, and so he's still trying to learn the position. So he didn't look good, and I think it was sort of like, oh gosh, they just don't have anyone to support this run game. There's no run game here. And he has started to put the pieces together, and you can see that he's incredibly physically gifted. He's a hard worker, you can tell, but his ability to make reads at the NFL level, it's just taken him a little bit of time, and he has gotten better pretty much. If you mapped his carries and his progression and his abilities, it's almost linear. It's a straight line. Every time he touches the football, he starts to learn something new and progress. And he's becoming a really nice option for him. And not in a receiving way so much just yet. That's still McKissick's area of expertise. But, this guy has a wide receiver pedigree. He's going to be sort of a more dual threat as he progresses.
Now, Jeffrey, before we get to our halfway mark of the podcast here, how can the Steelers stop the run, especially after losing one Alvin Bud Dupree?
Yeah, that's going to be a little bit of a tough mark over there on our right side of our defense because Bud Dupree is he is one of the elite run stopping edge defenders in the NFL. Highsmith is really good too, though. He's already shown he's really good. I'm kind of thinking that we might see Chris Wormley over there. The Steelers like to run some 4-3 looks. Everyone's seen them where T.J. Watt or Bud Dupree drop back and is one of the linebackers. We just saw Williamson, the guy we brought in. We just saw him play a lot more snaps last week. So we kind of have a situation where we could do 3 inside linebackers, Bud Dupree outside, on one side, and then you get a Chris Wormley or a Cam Hayward over there as the edge. That'll work. We can do that some. It's gonna be a group effort to replace Bud Dupree. No one's gonna get the 93% of snaps that Bud Dupree was getting in some of those games. Alex Highsmith's not ready for that, but it's gonna be mostly Alex Highsmith. We're gonna see that. They're gonna be solid. I don't think the guys I'm just talking about. I'm not talking about how they're defending the run. I'm saying who's going to replace Bud Dupree, because the reason I'm saying that is Chris Wormley is really solid in run defense. Alex Highsmith is really solid in run defense. So I think the run defense is going to be okay because even though they're not quite Bud Dupree, they're very good. That's what I'm saying.
So everyone listening on the podcast side, we are going to jump into our first break. So make sure you click over to part 2. Everyone hanging out on YouTube, just sit tight. Ladies and gentlemen, you are still listening to Behind the Steel Curtain. Once again, my name is Michael Beck, joined as always with Jeffrey Benedict and our special guest from Hogs Haven, one Mr. Brian Stab. Brian, I never asked before we got on. Are you going to hang out for another 30 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. Love it. First question coming back in our second half here. Terry McLaurin. Boy, oh boy, he's pretty good at playing wide receiver, I would say. Yeah. Has he been the best Washington football team wide receiver of the last 20 years?
This is a great question. He has been fantastic. And it's one of those situations where like the wide receiver core for this team has room for growth. I don't know, like what's the nice way of saying that they're not very good. They have a lot of guys that are unproven to this point. And so you knew that all of the targets, options 1, 2, and 3 are all going to be Terry McLaurin. He's getting double teamed. He has safeties over the top on him. He gets contact at the line. he's still making catches and he still makes plays. He's fantastic, and I think there is a chance he could be the first All-Pro that Washington has had since 1996. We had a punter who was an All-Pro, Matt Turk. Haven't had a guy since then.
Wow.
It's tough to be an All-Pro wide receiver because you have to be just like one of the 3 best guys, and he is maybe somewhere between 3 and 6 in my eyes at this point. And that is to answer your question. I mean, Washington has had a little bit of a glut in wide receiver talent. They had one year Deshaun Jackson was really crushing things. They had Pierre Garçon on that receiving core and Jamison Crowder. All 3 of them had 1,000 yards that year. But Terry McLaurin, people are feeling pretty good about him and his future, his present, his future. He's been our guy. He earned the captaincy patch, and he's really growing in that role too.
Now, Jeffrey, that's going to be an interesting challenge for the Steelers to stop, especially if Steven Nelson isn't good to go this week. Of course, he had an MRI on his knee kind of unexpectedly after that game. He finished the game, but still needed an MRI today. Still don't know the results on that, but how do you anticipate the Steelers trying to stop one Mr. Scary Terry?
But they're doing a great job on wide receivers, especially recently. I don't expect it to be too much of a problem. Our secondary is really good. Joe Hayden just had another good game. They'll be all right. I mean, he's the kind of guy that you're not going to shut down. Like, you're not going to shut down Terry McLaurin. And if your game plan is, we've got to stop this guy from doing anything, you're probably going to lose that game. You're going to have to accept that he's going to make some plays. He's going to convert some third downs. He's going to make some big catches. And you just have to find a way to win that, defend the team, keep his numbers down, stop the run and go. This team isn't an offensive juggernaut. Just keep him in check. Keep Terry McLaurin in check. Don't let him go off for 140 yards or something crazy, and you'll be all right.
Now, Brian, we mentioned kind of the 2 big names there. The running back that's kind of taking the league by storm. The big-time wide receiver, like you said, possibly the first All-Pro in my lifetime. Not to date myself, but who else on offense do you have that the Steelers should kind of concern themselves over?
Yeah, so really the 2 other guys that have made any of an impact, any splash, is Steven Sims out. He's the other wide receiver on the other side. Big play ability, but he's got to do everything right. And routinely, it's one of the things that he's not doing right. He's either not able to get himself open, or he'll miss routes on occasion. But when he is more of a home run threat than I think people would give him credit for, because you think McLaurin's the guy who you can go over the top. Steven Sims has great hands. He is sneaky quick. You can't just leave him in one-on-one coverage 100% of the time, because he will make you pay for it. But he still, again, is in a bit of a developing role. The other guy who's gotten a lot of attention of late is Logan Thomas at tight end. The tight end situation for the past years has been tricky. Jordan Reed was here, but never healthy. Just really a lot of people thought he was going to retire based on some of the concussion problems that he had. And it has been a challenge, especially I think it was for Dwayne Haskins, where when you're a young quarterback, you're looking for safety valves, and that's your guy who can go over the middle. That's your guy who can create some separation with his body, and that's your tight end. And Washington it just really hasn't been gangbusters since Jordan Reed was healthy early in his career. Thomas was a converted quarterback from college and has built himself into a nice role where he can get 8 targets and 5 catches for 35 yards, but 4 of those 5 catches will be for first downs, or will be in a long situation where you just have to rely on tight end. And his stats don't light it up because he's not really a home run threat so much. He's not like one of these tight ends who can change the game for you, but he has become incredibly reliable in a way that gives them some more flexibility and viability on the offensive side of the football.
Now, Brian, we've heard about the weapons. The Steelers defense has been playing some really good football, and that's kind of something that was expected throughout the year. What do they got to do to continue that success against Washington? And can they build on a game where they nearly pitched a shutout if it wasn't for really two dumb mistakes?
Yeah, and it's funny because the Pittsburgh Steelers, I saw someone, and this is no disrespect, I saw someone refer to them as the worst 10-0 team they had ever seen. And in my mind, I'm like, what on earth does that even mean? Like, how is that? Like, is that an insult? Is that a compliment? Like, what am I supposed to take with that information? That characteristic to me, it's like they have clearly done more than just one thing right to get to where they are. This is a talented football team. I don't need to tell you guys that. You guys know it because you get to watch them every week. I think they are in a situation right now that is totally unenviable, with sort of having to have moved these games around, and just the uncertainty and the level of just like having to be outside of your norms and your schedule, all the while, sort of like having the target on your back. That I think is challenging. I think it's hard. I think Washington, if they played the best they can play, they, based on the circumstances, may be able to sneak in there and get a win. But if I'm being completely honest, I think if Pittsburgh does what they have done so well this year, where they are aggressive on the front seven on defense, go up against a Washington offensive line that is, I don't want to call it a turnstile, but they've had some troubles over the course this year. And if they can create havoc in the backfield and just sort of like be themselves on offense, it'll take care of itself. I think that I watched the Ravens game, the Ravens Steelers game, and clearly they were a little bit out of sorts, and I do not blame them. It would not have been surprising to me for them to have lost that game just based on the circumstances. But Pittsburgh has, from what I've seen of them, they have just dominated in all facets of the game, and all they have to do is just be themselves. And I think that they could end up sort of walking away with this one if they play their best.
Yeah, this defense, I think, is going to prove that it's if they can play the game that they should be able to win against any opponent in the NFL. And that's what they've been able to do thus far. It'll be interesting to see whether or not they can continue that. But Jeffrey, flipping things over to the other side of the ball, what does the Steelers offense got to do to be successful in this game?
Get rid of the drops. That's a big one. Steelers were second in drop rate in the NFL as a team heading into that Baltimore game, where we saw 5 really bad drops. Like 5 really bad ones. It's just like Mike Tallman said, it's unacceptable. You can't be dropping that many passes. Because those were third down passes. Those were ones that would have turned a field goal into a touchdown. Those kind of passes, and you're just missing them. You're just dropping them. That really puts the offense behind, and we are not an offense right now that makes up those yards. We are not an offense that can get in a hole and make it up. Ben is not getting sacked, and we do little gains, and then every once in a while a chunk play. So they really have to get rid of the drops, because those are drive enders with this offense. That's the number one thing. I'm not even going to say anything about our run game, because we don't have one. So you can't get something going that doesn't exist. And so they've got to just not drop the ball, because that's how we have to move the ball.
Yeah, and really that's probably the difference yesterday. If the Steelers are able to get those drops, the game might not be close, and who knows if Bud Dupree tears his ACL, if it's even at that point in the game. So it's one of those things. It's kind of tough to say in football. But Brian, flipping it over to your defense now, yeah. Who are those kind of playmaking type guys that the Steelers fans should be aware of?
I think for all of the holes that exist wholesale across this team, the best unit in the entire team is the defensive front 4, with Chase Young and Montez Sweat on the outside, and Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne on the inside. They're, as a unit, I would take them over just about any other group on any other team at that position in the league. Chase Young has the fact that he's maybe the fourth best of the four is pretty remarkable. They have been fun to watch. Montez Sweat is another guy who still early in his career didn't get a lot of love. They sort of thought that he had a lot of learning to do. And this has been the year. This has kind of been his coming out party. He had, I'm not sure if you guys were able to see, he had this fantastic pick six where he runs into the backfield on Thanksgiving, knocks the ball out of the air. I picks it up out of the air and Johnson in the end zone and just like really put his foot on the throat of the Cowboys. He, I think, gets the least amount of attention between the four of them, but he's just going to, people feel really good about what we're seeing out of Montez Sweat and sort of what is still his first contract. This is a young group. They are finally all healthy. And when the four of them are operating on cylinders, they make it very challenging for opposing offensive lines and for quarterbacks who need to be able to get the ball out.
Just me puts $5 into the tip jar using a super chat option. Wants to ask you a question, Brian. Simply put, how can Washington beat us?
Yeah, great question. I sort of said if Washington plays their best and Pittsburgh plays their worst, I think that maybe abdicates some responsibility to see Washington win by saying that they need to catch an opponent who, you know, man for man is superior and has shown it thus far with a perfect record. I think if the Washington football team is able to establish the run, have a back-to-back 100-yard game for the first time this season, and what will be the first time for their running backs in the last, I believe, now year and a half. That's going to be key. And if the defense plays as well as they did last week or even the last 2 weeks, sort of putting that all together, I think that's how I see it happening. I don't think it's going to be, if Washington wins, I don't think it's going to be something like what we saw in this offensive explosion that they had over the Cowboys, putting up 41 points. It was the first time that a Washington football team has put up 41 points since 2016. Christmas Eve of 2016, they hung 41 on the Bears and haven't done it since. So it was just very anomalous. It was very much not something we were accustomed to doing and not something that I think we expect them to do. So really just they got to take advantage of the circumstances as unfortunate as they may be, have their best day and just kind of hope that Pittsburgh isn't feeling it. And maybe that's the set of circumstances where Washington wins the football game.
Now, I have another question for both of you guys this time. I'll start with Jeffrey on this one. Washington ends up with a little bit extra time off. Originally, both teams were scheduled to play on Thursday. The game then originally slated for Sunday, now on Monday. Steelers obviously played yesterday. I believe a 5-day difference here. Almost like a mini bye week for the Washington football team and an extremely short week for the Steelers. Jeffrey, how do you think this is going to impact the game?
It will have an impact. It's going to be interesting to see how. I think you're going to see Washington game planning for what they're seeing from the Steelers, and I think you're going to see the Steelers not have time to adjust to that. So what I would expect to see is Washington have a good first half. I think that's kind of what you see from that is they've had a little time to look at us, come up with a few things. We spent way too long preparing for the Ravens when we didn't even know who was going to be playing for them. And now we've got to go, turn to Washington. And in those short weeks, Tomlin is always just like, yeah, we're going to play to our strengths. Well, like if they're ready for that, if they have some answers for that, then it could be a rough first half. And then you got to hope the Steelers have adjustments in the second half coming out to respond.
Now, Brian, with this game, same question to you. Obviously, Washington has a little bit of time off. Are you expecting some the playbook to be opened up potentially, or what do you think? What do you think you're seeing in this game?
I think that in terms of the playbook, especially on the offensive side, they are doing as much as they can without trying to do too much. At talent at the skill positions has been non-consistent, I would say. They're starting to get used to each other, but when you have a quarterback who hasn't thrown a football in 3 years, and now he's really just trying to meet these guys, it's challenging, and you give them as much as you think they can handle, and then not much more. With regards to sort of the timing and the break there, Washington, they beat the Cowboys the first time. They kind of blew them out too, 25-3 back in week 7. Then they have their bye week and come out and roll over against the New York Giants. So the time off hasn't necessarily yielded positive results. They actually went 0-2 coming out of the bye week. And so, it's always that question. Would you rather be more rested than less rested? Would you rather be more rested, or would you rather have, your momentum going straight in? I certainly wouldn't want to have to turn around and do a Wednesday and then even into a Monday. The whole thing, the rhythms have been so challenging. And I mean, what are these guys? They're creatures of habit, and that's why they're able to be so successful in a lot of ways. And so to have to go through all of this and then play a happy hour game on a Monday is just like, okay, like how mentally strong are you to be able to figure this all out? And I think we're going to learn a lot about the players on both of these teams, sort of based on the way that they perform.
Yeah, this is going to be a huge game to really kind of separate the boys from the men. Really, it's as cliche as it sounds. It's really going to kind of show who the stars of either team are and who those veteran types are. And Jeffrey, of course, the Steelers played a stinker yesterday. There's no doubt about it. Is there any potential they come out and play as poorly as they did on Wednesday night as they potentially could on that Monday late afternoon slot?
I mean, there's always potential, and it could be worse. We could have, because as bad as the receivers were playing, Ben Roethlisberger wasn't great, but he didn't have a bad game. So that's always when you ask me, like, how bad could this be? I'm like, well, it depends. Is Ben Roethlisberger going to go out there and be like, you know what? I think today is that day. I'm throwing 5 interceptions and a half. Like, that's as bad as it could get. Is Ben Roethlisberger just has one of those games that he admittedly doesn't have as much anymore. He hasn't had them quite as often as he used to, and they were never really frequent. But it could still happen. So that could always happen. I don't expect it. I don't really expect too bad of a game here from the Steelers, and I think they'll be slow. I think they'll get going slowly, and then they'll kick it into gear in the second half and hope that's enough to win.
Now, Brian, talking back to the Steelers offense, out of the guys in the lineup, who scares you most that could potentially have the biggest game against your team?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Juju is just like on just another planet in terms of his talent, his ability. He's been one of the most fun receivers to watch in this league. Interestingly enough, up until, I don't know, I want to say a week or two, Washington had a better passing defense than they did rushing defense, which was kind of hard to believe because the talent in that defensive secondary, man for man, is hit or miss. They've had a number of injuries over the course of this year. I mean, Landon Collins has gone on IR. They had cornerback Greg Stroman. The linebackers really haven't given a ton of help. That's probably been, if not for the offensive line, maybe the weakest position group on the team. So, I mean, the passing game, I think for the Steelers, if they can get something going, if they can develop a rhythm, and I don't really see why they wouldn't be able to, they are going to be able to feed Juju the ball. And I could see him going for like 150 and 2 touchdowns if they really decide to like put the oomph there. You mentioned that, the run game has been not so hot. I mean, I know that there's been injuries with James Conner going out. It will be important for them, I think, to be able to establish a run in order to, have credibility in your play actions and sort of make the corners and the safeties have to think twice about whether or not they need to go in and make a tackle. But the talent, I think, that the Steelers have at wide receiver is just, it's pretty remarkable to me. I think that they have a fantastic core.
Now, Jeffrey, how do you anticipate the Steelers using that core and really that entire defense or offense, rather, I should say? How do you expect the Steelers offense to kind of game plan who's getting the ball the most this week.
Well, I want to say something with what Brian said, because I would love to see the Steelers use Juju right again. We have seen too many games where it's like, we're not throwing to Juju Smith-Schuster unless he's within a yard of the line of scrimmage. I think he had like 8 yards from line of scrimmage on like 5 of his passes. Like, you can throw it downfield to him. He has he has more big plays than most receivers in our team's history in just his first couple of years. Like, he's a guy who can make all the routes. He can run all the routes. He can make all the catches. Like, they don't trust him to run a 10-yard out route. Like, or they just don't throw him the ball. Like, it drives me crazy. And I would love to see them actually open up the offense a bit and throw it to Juju when he's not running some little underneath route where you're like, okay, Deontay Johnson's dropped 3 passes in a row. Let's throw to Juju 1 yard from the line of scrimmage and hope he can drag 3 defenders for 5 yards. Like really use him. Okay, got that out. And established run. We do need to establish the run, because if we can't run, you can't just let Montez Sweat, Chase Young, Josh Allen. You can't just let those guys tee off on your quarterback and be like, no, that's okay. Well, we'll just ask Ben to throw it quickly, all the time. They've got to try and run the ball, which, as I've seen in the chat, and I have an article coming out tomorrow talking about it, the Steelers need to actually run their run blockers. Stop being like, oh, we're committed to the run game and we're going to run out of our passing sets with all of our best receivers out there. Put in some actual blockers. Okay. But the Steelers on offense, goodness, I really think the Steelers are going to come out and do what they've been doing. Throw timing routes to Deontay Johnson, throw to Juju only when he's underneath, and make him, drag people for yards to convert first downs. Throw some bombs to Chase Claypool and get James Washington a few catches here and there while you keep forcing everything in ways that drive me crazy, which is what the Steelers are pretty much designed to do right now, is drive their fans crazy. So while still winning the game, it's like we don't really have room to complain, and yet, oh man, they're frustrating the heck out of me. So,
like I said, I'll take what you guys got.
I know.
Listen,
I know.
I'll
I want to tell you,
bullet for you. Listen.
Yeah, my first football team that I cheered for was Washington.
Yeah.
1991. I was a fan,
and they lost you somehow.
That
was the best time to be a fan.
It was like, no, I talked earlier about 1995, where I'm right outside of Pittsburgh, and like everything's gearing up for this Dallas Cowboys Steelers Super Bowl in 1995, and I'm sitting there thinking, this is a team that lost to my Redskins twice. Come on,
yeah,
who you're gonna? But over the years, Dan Snyder, man, and just they fell out of national television, couldn't watch the games.
Yep.
And I was by 95, I was a Darryl Green and Rod Woodson fan. Those were my 2 favorite players.
Sure.
Still my 2 favorite players I've ever watched play football. So I kind of fell off of the Washington football team.
It's a struggle for all of us, I'll tell you.
Yeah, you know what? They should just put a potato on the side of the helmet and get over it.
I'll be honest. Washington football team, I might be in the minority on this. Washington football team has grown on me.
Yeah.
To the point where
you are the football team.
Yeah, we're the football team. I mean,
yeah.
Who
is there another football team? I don't know.
Just us. That's it.
It's just Washington.
Yeah, I mean.
Oh man. I was a huge fan, and it drives. This is the frustrating thing about the Steelers season, is that you're frustrated, but do you really have room to be frustrated? And this is really our debate, while other teams are sitting there being like, wow, you bunch of whiny babies, your team's 11-0. Like, what's your problem? Stop whining. And we're like, yeah, but they're not playing well. Oh, okay. I'm going to take a breath.
I was of the belief that winning cures all angst, but apparently you're proving me wrong here, because
the Steelers Twitter is a nightmare, and Reddit as well. It's a nightmare to navigate these days, and they're 11-0. But
yeah, I just went on a rant earlier, the thing being like relax, people. It's okay. We're 11-0, and I'm still like, I have to preach to myself that, because this team is frustrating.
Brian, I'll get back to you here. The Washington football team in this game, do they have anything to lose? Are they going to go for the gusto, pull out all the triple reverses, and is it going to be one of those wacky games where they're just going to do whatever it takes to win and potentially shoot themselves in the foot, or what do you kind of expect?
This is a team that early on in the season, they just developed an ideology that they were willing to take chances because, even while they were saying we're in this to try to win a division, we recognize that there's a chance. They've been vocal about it. They haven't shied away from it. Ron Rivera had the nickname Riverboat Ron, and you ask a lot of people around here. Some people think that his play calling has been a little bit conservative, but I think as they've been able to open up the playbook a little bit more, he's starting to show that some. A couple weeks ago, the second in the Giants' loss, they had a chance to tie at the gun and opted to go for two to win the football game with Kyle Allen at quarterback. And the play is developing, and a quarterback who is not Kyle Allen identifies what's going on and is able to run the ball on himself, and they win that football game, which would put them in first place in this division right now. So, they lose, and in that they lose that contest and say, look, we're here. We're letting people know we're going to gamble. We're going to try. We're not playing safe. We're going to play hard. We're going to play fast. We're going to try and do some stuff that really we're playing with. I don't want to say they have reckless abandon, but they are definitely not gonna, run it on or punt on 4th and 1 at midfield. They're going for it, and they have sort of said, it'd be great if we win this thing, but really we're out here to sort of develop an attitude and a culture that we're gonna go for it. And so, while they have not had a lot of razzle dazzle this year, I mean, they play kind of a traditional style of football. They at times will show you glimmers of things where you're not expecting it. You don't see it coming because it's not what you come to really expect out of a team that I think is still trying to develop and learn who they are. So I would say there's a chance that they pull out some of the stops here in order to, we may see something that we have not seen so far this year on tape. I think would be the way of putting it.
Yeah, and that's something I'm partially expecting, basically from any team that might not necessarily be in playoff contention from here on in. Of course, Washington is, but a little bit of a different situation in the NFC East.
Yeah,
Brian, I'm going to come right back to you. As the Steelers continue to win, I think this is a question I'm going to start asking our guests more and more. Is 16-0 a curse? Is that something the Steelers should even care about? And what are your thoughts on this team potentially gunning for a record like that?
I think if it comes down to a set of circumstances where they have a shot to do it, I mean, you go out there, what do they say? You play to win the game. But that said, they've already had to endure a lot. I mean, we're already at a point in the season where they had their bye week get moved. Is that correct? The Titans outbreak. Now they're dealing with the separate outbreak. They've had to move 2 games. They were going to play on Thanksgiving. Now they're playing Monday afternoon. By the end of the year, let's say they are 1 win away from going undefeated, but they've just had to endure a lot, and they could really stand to benefit from resting some of their guys and not putting them in a position where a mistake could happen or something bad could happen to a guy because you identify that you can make a playoff run, like a deep playoff run. It's what's your tolerance of risk? What's your goal really? Is your goal to be the champions, host Lombardi Trophy? I mean, I'm sure they'd say yes, but it's a question of like, what level of risk are we willing to tolerate? What if Ben Roethlisberger gets hurt in pursuit of a perfect season? It's something they're going to have to weigh if it comes down to that. I mean, should they try to put themselves in as good position as they can to be the 1 seed in the AFC? I think certainly yes. Let's say they have that locked up and they have this one other thing that they could go for. I think you kind of got to assess the situation when you get to that point, but knowing that they've had to sort of deal with a lot of challenges, and adversity, some of which has been external, some of which has been internal. It's going to be a tricky thing to have to weigh.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. I think if it comes down to winning that game means you get the first seed, I think they go for it. Otherwise, I feel like resting their starters kind of seems to be the way that it might go. A couple more super quick questions here. I'll pose this one to Jeffrey first. All of our guests, we always ask if there's one player they could pluck off the Steelers and throw on your own team, who would it be? The thing is, you can't say TJ Watt because everyone said that in the first 10 weeks of the year. So I'll let you think of your answer while I throw it to Jeffrey here, who knows this was coming.
Oh, you're asking me
who would you take off Washington and throw in the Steelers?
Man, I love Terry McLaurin. I know we have a wide receiver room where he's coming in and he's going to be a top guy, but how much is he actually adding when you're just sliding down a guy who's already good to put in a guy who's better? You know what? With Bud Dupree gone and leaving, I'll go ahead and I'll take Chase Young. I would even take Sweat. That whole defensive line is full of guys that I loved when they were coming out into the draft. I loved their game. I'd take any of those guys, but I'll take Chase.
Chase Claypool and Chase Young.
There we go.
Exactly. So Brian, who's your guy?
I mean, and you said I can't take TJ Watt
because everyone did. It started getting a little dry.
Okay, just to make sure, I wanted to make sure if you wouldn't want to make an exception. I mean, there are some other guys I would take. This is a team full of not just guys. There are some dudes on this team. I mean, I already shouted out my love for Juju. I mean, you have Terry McLaurin there, but the drop off is steep. If you had Terry McLaurin on one side and Juju Smith-Schuster on the other side, that ends up becoming a circumstance where no matter who you have a quarterback, they're gonna be able to have an open guy, basically, either by force or by sort of personnel strategy. There's gonna be a weapon there. Frankly, there are actually two guys on defense who are not TJ Watt that I really, really, really like. Actually, I'm gonna go ahead and say three. It's all secondary guys. Joe Hayden, local kid, grew up in Maryland. Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think there were a lot of people that really, really wanted to find a way to get Minkah Fitzpatrick in burgundy and gold, either at the draft or via trade. That would just be, he would be a game changer for kind of an ailing position. And personal, I got some love for Sean Davis, who also is a local DMV kid, played at my rival high school's football team and just was so much better than everybody else. He was just a fun guy to watch. So I don't think I answered the question, but if the answer is one guy, I'm picking TJ Watt, but any of those other ones are really good.
Oh, I like it. Final question of the night. Our score predictions for the game. Jeffrey, I'll start with you on this one. What's the final score? And will the Steelers move to 12-0?
I'm going to go 21-17 Steelers.
4-point game. Brian, what are you thinking?
I think the spread was 9.5. I think Washington will cover. I was going to say 24-20. I think sort of the confluence of things happening there makes this one competitive, but so close, but no cigar for Washington. I think Pittsburgh is clearly the favorite here, but it's not a blowout.
And for me, I personally think Mike Tomlin getting on the Steelers' ass and really raising a fuss yesterday. I think this week's going to be a hard one and kind of teach the team a lesson. I think they will actually get that point spread in their favor. I'm predicting the Steelers 27-13, a 2-score game. I just think I think this might be a whole different mood and a little bit more focused team after what happened against Baltimore. But Brian, as we get out of here, is there anything you want to plug?
Hogs Haven, if you have we have some fantastic writers over there. It can be a challenging team to write about, especially from a fan's perspective, and we have a fantastic group of folks who write and really do a really great job producing. I also have a podcast that we just launched this season, the Cult of Colt podcast, named after everyone's favorite Washington football team quarterback, Colt Brennan. You can find us on Twitter at Cult of Colt, and anywhere you can get podcasts, we're pretty much there. Search for Hogs Haven, a Washington football team podcast.
Make sure to check that out. Jeffrey, is same question. What do you got coming out on the Behind the Steel Curtain verse?
I just had a film room today on the defense, how we changed up the way we play the Ravens. We completely reversed course on how we defend the Ravens option game. And then also covering Joe Hayden and Terrell Edmonds doing exactly what they did last season, giving up touchdowns, but also getting picks on those gambles that they run. And I've got one coming out later this week on the end of the first half plays with Harbaugh throwing a fit about them laying on somebody, breaking down the film on that and what actually happened. And it's actually it's going to be fun. It's a crazy play, and it's going to be a good read.
So make sure you're checking that out tomorrow. Once again, you have been listening to Behind the Steel Curtains, Know Your Enemy, for week 13. Believe it or not, the season is nearly at its end. Make sure you're clicking over to BehindTheSteelCurtain.com and listening to our entire family podcast. For Jeffrey and Brian, my name is Michael Beck. Thank you for tuning in, and we will catch you next week.